Welcome. My name is James Stone, and I am been working on salmon and water policy issues out of Southern California for over the last decade, representing NorCal Guides and Sportsmen's Association. Best way to support us as a nonprofit 501c3 is just to go to ncgasa.org and support us for $30 or any dollar amount that you want. The last 2 years, the Mokelumne setting record returns. Now, that hatchery is doing some of the most innovative stuff out there. It's in the San Joaquin system. It's ran by a great hatchery manager that's working his tail off, that works all hours of the night. He's constantly scheduling the correct releases, outgoing tides, nighttime releases to prevent predation from avian birds, cormorants, and striped bass, black bass, and all other types of predation. And he's doing great things. But the last 2 years have been record-setting runs on the Mokelumne. I'm about to tell you all that, but there's been no fishing. So how do we call it a record run when there's no fishing? But the news channels love going over there and saying, oh, you got a record run. Salmon's doing great. And then the next thing I see is the Fresno Bee writing an article about how many salmon are in the valley, yet they can't get any water. Because the Mokelumne raises full-run fish that are not listed under the Endangered Species Act. They have nothing to do with your water, and except for East Bay mud and water that goes to the Eastern Bay Area, because that's what the water that comes out of Comanche goes. But the Mokelumne fish have nothing to do with your water diversions north of the Delta or south of the Delta. The San Joaquin system has been completely extinct of salmon, and they started rebuilding after the last collapse of 2007, 8, and 9, and 10. And after those last closures, we were fully closed for salmon in the state of California in 2008, 2009. And that's when, after the Mokelumne hatchery started rebuilding, because they wanted to try to rebuild. And they're doing a fantastic job. But it doesn't matter if they have no fish come back or record fish come back. It will not affect anything to do with your water policy, and it will not have anything to do with you getting the opportunity to going back fishing again, inland or ocean, commercial, charter, or recreational. The Mokelumne is bonus. And in fact, a lot of the fish from the Mokelumne are funded by the commercial fleet through CSAMP. So the commercial fleet pay in to those fees to raise an extra 3 million fish at the Mokelumne hatchery in order to boost the numbers out in the ocean. And the state of California has done a great job the last couple of years raising those numbers of fish. Originally, just 7-8 years ago, they were only raising 4 million, 5 million fish at the maximum. Now they're raising 9 million fish, 9.5 million fish out of the Mokelumne. So just an absolute wonderful job for them. So, Michael Hale, thank you for saying that. Yeah, they do stray a lot. Seahawk sport fishing, where are all the silvers coming from? We saw in the coastals this fall. Great question, Seahawk. Those are coming from Oregon. There was a huge return on the Willamette this year. I just talked to some Oregonians just the other day. I've been having multiple conversations with people on the Rogue, and everything in Southern Oregon as well as Northern Oregon. But there was huge amount of numbers of fish that came out of Willamette, and another record run on coho silvers, which we are not allowed to keep in the ocean or inland. We're not allowed to keep silver salmon in California. But that's where they did come from. I think we'll see a lot more information about that on February 27th, which is the Oregon Salmon Information Meeting. So I encourage you to tune into that one. Is we see in all of the articles and all the people commenting, oh, we got to kill all the stripers. We got to kill all the largemouth. That's what's killing our salmon. Predation does happen. Fish eat fish. If you didn't know that, now you do. They do eat each other. Steelhead eat salmon. They've even said that other salmon might eat other salmon. If there's yearlings in the river, they might predate upon smaller fish. Pike minnow eat fry. Hardheads eat eggs. White and green sturgeon eat eggs out of the gravel. There's lots of fish that eat each other. This has been going on since the beginning, since God created these animals. But let me tell you this, striped bass have been in the system for over 142 years. Okay, 142 years. Actually, it might be 146 now. I think we're getting up there. It was 1879, I believe, was the date that striped bass got brought over in barrels across horse and buggy in order to get here and create a recreational fishery for striped bass. I want you to remember this. Striped bass, salmon, steelhead, sturgeon, shad, the 5 anadromous species that spawn in freshwater and go out into saltwater to live their lives and then come back into freshwater to spawn for their babies to rebuild and remake, right? Okay, that's the bedroom, okay? The bedroom is the rivers, right? So if you have unhealthy rivers, you have no water coming down your rivers, no water going out to your ocean, then your babies don't get out there, and then 3 years later you have collapses in your salmon populations. But for 140 plus years, we've had striped bass and salmon in the same estuary with no problems, okay? The only time stripers seem to become a problem is when people can't go salmon fishing, and then everyone loves to blame striped bass. So I just want you to know that the truth, the science, the data, okay, from everyone that's out there can show that the species decline together and they rise together. When there's good water, there's good spawning for salmon, striper, sturgeon, shad, steelhead. When there's terrible water, we have complete cohort collapses, which mean the cohort of that year collapses and nothing spawns and nothing makes it. So that's the truth, just so you know. I understand that they eat them. I understand you've seen videos. I understand you've cut open a striper before and seen 15, 20 salmon smolts in there. That's more hatchery operations, hatchery practices, and how we release our hatchery salmon, and not necessarily all baby salmon and juveniles on how that works. I understand that that is a concern, though. I'll get back to that in a minute. All right, so let me keep going. How much money has the ESA listed fish brought to the people in charge of saving them? Great question, Chris Iverson. We got about 150 people live here right now. This conversation's just getting going, guys. This is going to get real good today. How much money has the ESA listed spent on salmon? On winter run? I mean, we're in the hundreds of millions. I would probably say billions is an easy number to say of how much, because there's millions of dollars of grants that come into the federal government, millions of dollars that come into the state government to fight for these ESA, CESA listed species. And then on top of that, there's millions, tens of millions of dollars that comes in as grants to these NGOs, these non-government organizations, these environmental groups. Your tax dollars fund these environmental groups. And I think a lot of people have been waking up lately on what our government is actually funding. Well, they've been funding a lot of these environmental groups. They give them millions of dollars to then go back and sue the own government over water, over these issues. Because if you sue over an ESA listed fish, it gives you control over the water. Does that make sense? So maybe people get that. Good question, Chris. Terry King, do they have as many seals and sea lions to get through like the Columbia River? Well, great question, Terry King. Good to see you, buddy. Terry, seals and sea lions, pinnipeds, were originally protected. I think it was 1972 Marine Mammal Protection Act. And I want to say that was 72. Back then, the California sea lion numbers were below like 80,000, or they were like 40,000, 38,000, I want to say. That was my rough guess. I haven't looked at this since COVID. So it's been like 2019 since I looked at those numbers. However, I know that they wanted to get the numbers over 80,000 animals, California sea lions, back in the 70s. It's estimated that there's over 400,000 sea lions, according to my source in the federal government, that told me there's over 400,000 California sea lions now. So we're 500% of where we were supposed to get them, and then they might get delisted, and there would be no protections on them anymore. But we're still protecting them here 53 years later, and those sea lions have no food, right? Because they've eaten everything up and down off the California coast, and the seals too. They're now sitting at the mouth of almost every coastal river, destroying our steelhead populations, destroying our salmon populations, and then they had to move, right? It's just like anything else, right? If there's too many people living in one area and not enough resources to compete over, people get forced out, right? Same kind of thing. So what happens is now all these seals and sea lions are getting forced out, and now they're all the way up into Washington, okay? And now people in Washington and Oregon are very, very affected by these pinnipeds. So yes, there's a lot of issues going on. The only people that can take them are going to be tribes. Great question. A lot of crossover, right? In the Feather River, we're seeing a 100% pure mix under the State Water Project. So, and this is the funny thing, is that if anyone's on here from Southern California and you want to know, well, why don't we get water, and how does that affect salmon? Well, you're affected under the State Water Project, which is Lake Oroville, 3.5 million acre feet. And those fish there are only spring run listed fish and fall run non-listed fish. But they did not create the 50-year FERC license back in 2007 on Oroville, which in that FERC settlement agreement was $200 million set aside for salmon, habitat restoration, and hatchery improvements to keep the species going. $4 million a year times 50 years. That hasn't happened in the last 18 years. There's been no money coming down for that. But part of that was to put a segregation weir at the Feather River to separate spring run and fall run. Now, everyone on here has a mom and everyone has a dad, okay? Now, in your chromosomes, in your DNA, just like salmon, you're given two alleles. One allele from mom, one allele from dad. Chromosome number 28, I am not a scientist, I've just worked too much in salmon, but chromosome number 28, according to the top scientists in the state of California and the federal government, claim that the allele in chromosome 28 has a run timing allele. And so some parents will give fall run time, you come back in the fall. However, in the Feather River, a lot of these fish had a spring run and they spawned with a fall run, so their babies got 1 and 1, and they called them the sprawl run. And now some geneticists are freaking out over this, and they have been for years, and they're trying to find a way to get in there and separate the two runs so that genetically they can make them more pure. Personally, I think that, salmon can spawn with salmon, and I don't think that it's that big of a deal. However, some of the top geneticists are putting curtailments, and they put protections to prevent that crossbreeding. But it does happen. It happens a lot less in the Sacramento main stem because of the run timing, and the fish are coming back at different times, as well as you don't see it as often because, like I said, the winter run are spawning in the heat of the summer, and then your spring runners are spawning in late August and September, and then your fall run are spawning in October, November, and then your late fall spawn in November, December. So you're not really seeing a lot of cross, but you can at times see cross, and that's going to normally be between spring and fall because generally both adults are in the river at the same time. So areas on the Sacramento River like Deer Creek, Mill Creek, areas up in the Klamath like Shasta and Scott River, there are concerns from some people of this crossbreeding, and that's that. Sorry, there's a lot of people on here. Trey Hillard from Battle Creek. Hey, how are you? Great to see you, Trey. One of the chairmen for the Battle Creek Watershed Conservancy groups that I sit on, and our group has sat on that group for many years. Battle Creek, can you speak on the plan to modernize Coleman Hatchery? Yes, great. Coleman is going to, I'll do that next when I get to the numbers for Coleman, and I'll do that, Trey, and I'll get to Coleman. But there is going to be modernization done at the Coleman National Fish Hatchery, and our group and the Bridge Group, which are the other industry leaders, George Bradshaw, Johnny Atkinson, myself, Sarah Bates, Lisa D., as well as the Bridge Group and the Sacramento River settlement contractors and the other farmers from the North State are advocating for a new hatchery on the Sacramento River immediately to be done in order to do that. And we will be traveling to D.C. to fight for a new federal hatchery on the Sacramento River. But there are going to be some updates going to Coleman, including a new ozone treatment that they just did that the Bureau funded for $5 million, and other upgrades that are going to be done in order to help with the water, because we have a major water dilemma happening on Battle Creek because of PG&E possibly evacuating in 2026 their barriers and their hydroelectric, which they would no longer be responsible for their mitigation because those barriers possibly could be removed. So Department of Commerce, National Marine Fisheries Service, NOAA Fisheries that set the rules of what the Department of Interior, U.S. Fish and Wildlife can do and what the state of California, CDFW, can do. They're the ones that have that oversight, Department of Commerce. Sarah Bates, a commercial fisherman out of San Francisco, she says it best. Salmon czar, she said this years ago. If we had a salmon czar, one person that would just go around and say to every agency, nope, you're doing that wrong, you're doing this right, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that right, you need to do this, you need to do that, and connected all of the dots of salmon, we would definitely start rebounding a lot faster. There's too many hands and too many puzzle pieces to connect salmon, and it oftentimes gets off into the weeds when we're trying to focus on one topic with salmon, and unfortunately, it creates a lot of problems. Fish doesn't mean anything to anglers. That's right. So we either have to get access from the Sacramento Klamath numbers, because those are the two fisheries that regulate us getting out on the ocean in order to access those bonus fish, because otherwise it does nobody no good. And like you just said, Steve, the only people it does good is the reporters that get to show up and go, record returns on the Mokelumne River this year. And we had no fishing, so they're really not record returns. So here we go. What happened last year at Sacramento? The Sacramento River in 2024 only saw about 4,500 fish, adults. About 4,500 fish. They actually had more jacks come back to the river, which are 2-year-olds. So when you hear me say adult salmon are always a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, or a 5-year-old. We used to even get 6-year-olds. Actually, there was a 7-year-old caught a few years back, which was one of the most rarest fish. It's caught by George Bradshaw, commercial angler, fishing vessel Swan out of Crescent City. I think he caught it in between Bodega Bay and San Francisco, if I'm correct. I might be off on that, but it was a rare fish. But typically, most of our adult salmon return in 3 years. So it's a 3-year life cycle. We do have a percentage. Anywhere from 10 to 20% return as 4 and 5-year-olds, typically. So what happens today, all this water you're seeing right now, February 2025, that doesn't affect the salmon season this fall. All this water right now, all it's doing is flushing the babies out from last fall that were born in the river. So brood year 24 is now going out in the spring of 25, and those fish will come back in the fall of 27. So all this water right now is creating a lot of fish exiting, surviving, and creating higher abundances for our 2027 season. So that's looking really good right now. Unfortunately, this water's all coming right now early, and so we don't have a lot of releases out yet, and most of the salmon releases from the hatcheries don't start until March, April, May, and June. So we need this water to keep coming, and keep praying. But looking back to the Sacramento last year, 4,500 fish, it's not that many fish. It's not a lot of fish. It's actually one of the worst that's ever returned, except for 2017. And we have a full collapse. There was less than like 1,200 spawning females, or less than 1,400 spawning females this last year in the Sacramento main stem in the river. That's almost as bad as the winter run, gentlemen and ladies. I just told you we only had 800 winter run, right? And now we're talking that we're only getting 4,500 fish back for the fall run. That's terrible. The minimum that is needed, okay, the MSST, if you were to build an MSST for the Sacramento main stem, they say is 50 to 100,000 adults need to be in the main stem river. That doesn't count Coleman. That doesn't count Battle Creek, Deer Creek, Mill Creek, and all of the others. All of them, all the tributaries. This is just the main stem needs to have that 50 to 100,000 fish in it in order to have a minimum cohort reconstruction, spawner recruit relationship in order to build higher abundances. So it's terrible. Coleman, they didn't get their eggs. They only got 2,600 fish back. 2,600 adults came back to Coleman. They need minimum of 12,000 adults in order to get all of their eggs. They normally want to take, right around 20 million green eggs, 18 to 20 million green eggs to have a finished product of about 12 million fall run smolts to grow for everybody. And then they release them in river. The reason they're always released in river in the Sacramento off Battle Creek is because if you truck fish from Coleman, from Battle Creek water, straight to the bay or ocean, those fish don't come back. 3-4 years later, they don't come back. 99% stray rate. So those fish never come back, and so that's why trucking does not work off of the Coleman Hatchery. It's one of the reasons that the Bridge Group has just proposed this year to put 400,000 fish in a net pen outside of Tehama-Colusa Irrigation District. Big thank you to TCID up there at a Red Bluff. And we're going to move 400,000 fish out of Coleman, put them into a net pen, and rear them in the net pen for 3 to 4 weeks, get them all big, put some acoustic tags in them, and then we're going to truck them all the way down to the Golden Gate and see if in 3 years some of those fish come straight back. Because if they do, then that proves our theory of the new hatchery on the Sacramento River be all main stem water, and those fish will imprint in the new hatchery on main stem in a drought condition or poor water conditions. We would be able to actually truck our fish and still get returns like the feather, like the American, like the Mokelumne. Again, I started this live with the reason that we're even still fishing the last 15 years, because our rivers are dead. The life in our rivers are completely dead and gone. Everything's gone. It's just dead. And so if we don't modify and do something different, if we keep doing the same old thing expecting different results, that's the definition of insanity. And that's what we've been doing since the last collapse of 2008 and 2009. And here we are on a second year collapse, 2023, 2024, hoping that we're going to be fishing next year. So let's get to the feather. The Feather River had a total of around 40,000 fish come back roughly. And you saw around, I think it was around like 15,000, roughly 14.5 in the natural area, or in the hatchery, about 14,000, 15,000 adults in the hatchery of the Feather River, and over 20,000 plus in the natural spawning areas. So if you did a simple split, and you just said like a 60-40 or 50-50 split, male-female, let's just go 50-50 for easy numbers. You said there's 22,000 fish in the Feather River, okay? Spawning, right, in the river. 11,000 females multiplied by an easy number of 5,000 eggs. You now can figure out that you've got, how many fish do you got in there? I believe that's 55 million. That puts 55 million eggs in the actual river. So that's what you need, right? That's what you need. 55 million eggs in the river in the Feather. Let's go back to the Sac real quick. Remember what I told you, how many fish were in the Sac? Total, with all tributaries, there was less than 1,400 females. 1,400 females multiplied by 5,000, you're talking 6.5 million eggs. 6.5 million eggs in the entire Sacramento River and tributaries. That's terrible. That's not sustainable, and the population will not rebound from that. It just can't. It's gone. If we don't do major reintroduction into the Sacramento River, we're in big trouble. But about 55 million eggs, my guess, are in the gravel at the Feather River. And the Feather River got all of their fish, and thank you to the Feather River and their staff. And the new hatchery manager up there is awesome. And she worked really hard at getting some extra eggs, and we transferred 2 million eggs from CDFW's Feather facility up to Coleman on the advice of the Bridge Group and the NorCal Guides, our group, NCGASA, PCFFA, the commercial fleet, as well as GGFA, Golden Gate Fishermen's Association, the charter boat fleet, ran by Johnny Atkinson and Rick Powers. They were the ones, those three groups, as well as some of the water districts in the North State, advocated for that. And we were able to get those fish transferred up to Coleman because Coleman only took about 5 million eggs total, and they didn't get to that 18 to 20 million that they needed. Moving downstream even further, we get to the American River that saw the largest return out of any of the system of the Sacramento River system. The American River right there out of Sacramento, right at Discovery Park, saw right around 48,000 fish total. I mean, what a huge return for the American River, right? And a lot of people are like, wow, the American River, 50,000 fish, that's a lot. Like, how did it get so many fish? How did it do so well? Well, most of those fish are strays from the Mokelumne River. So those fish that don't count if they go to the Mokelumne, right? They don't count if they end up in Napa River, Walnut Creek, Coyote Creek, or any of these others, Stanislaus, Tuolumne, any of those other rivers, they don't count. But if the Mokelumne fish or any other fish, it doesn't matter where you're from, your point of origin, if you end up back in the American River because it's the lowest river in the system, the easiest to get to, total river miles, under 75 river miles to the mouth from the Golden Gate, and it's a short run, right? It's not like getting back to Battle Creek, 300 plus 330 miles, 274 river miles to be exact to the mouth of Battle Creek, / the 45, 50 miles to the Golden Gate. So it's a lot different getting back to the American River. But the reason the number was so big on the American, it didn't have anything to do with the high success rates of American River fish. It had to do with the higher success rates of the Mokelumne River fish. And you want me to fix my sweatshirt string? Sorry. You want me to fix my sweatshirt string? I love it, Caesar. All right, there you go. It's cold. Sorry about that. So, the American River saw those 48,000 fish roughly, about 10,000 came back to the hatchery is the estimate that I heard. And so, of those fish, we want to thank the American River Hatchery because they also shipped eggs all the way from Nimbus, the base of Folsom, all the way up to Coleman National Fish Hatchery on Battle Creek as well. A few million eggs. I want to say it was 3 or 4 million eggs too. So thank you very much to the American River Hatchery, or the Nimbus Hatchery. Sorry, there's the Nimbus Hatchery, which is an adromous, and then the American River Hatchery next door to each other that does the rainbow trout for the state of California. So both of those hatcheries contributed, and we want to thank both of them. Thank you to their hatchery manager, getting those fish, extra eggs taken, and shipping those fish up. But the reason that you saw so many fish in the actual river was because a lot of the strays go into that American River. So the Mokelumne strays have been back and forth. The Mokelumne River generally has a stray rate of somewhere between 22, I think, on a low, to upwards of 50% of the fish in the American River that count to the SI index are actually from the other hatchery, the Mokelumne. So one of the advantages of actually not going fishing last year was that all of these extra fish from the Mokelumne were available because we didn't catch them in the ocean. And so they strayed into the American and made that number a little bit higher, because my calculations are about 30% of that run were 30+% were Mokelumne fish. So that could have very well been lower than 35,000 fish in the American River if the Mokelumne River fish were caught. So that's really interesting to know, right? And remember, everyone wants to go fishing. I want to go fishing. You want to go fishing. Everyone I know wants to go fishing. It's not about whether we want to go fishing. It's about whether or not we go fishing and we do damage to the fishery to the point to where we're not allowed to go fishing anymore and they take it all away from us. Winter run example, spring run example, sturgeon example, steelhead example. I mean, I don't know how I have to keep going, but that's what happens if you go fishing when you shouldn't. You have to be responsible stewards of the resource, because our government will allow us just to do whatever they're allowed to do within the lines of the pencil. So we have to be a little bit more smart, and we have to be a little less greedy and make sure that we're not going out there and impacting a fishery and a resource that doesn't belong to you, doesn't belong to me, doesn't belong to the guides, doesn't belong to the commercial fleet. The resource belongs to the people of California and actually the people of the United States once they enter international waters out in the ocean. So these fish belong to all of us. And we need to make sure that we are protecting those stocks and that we are harvesting responsibly so that we can continue to harvest every single year and that our kids and our grandkids can hopefully take over some of our businesses that are still around, because many businesses are closed. So that gives you your total numbers and puts the total escapement in 2024 in the Sacramento below 100,000 fish. And it misses the 122. So there were a lot of people in March and April that were saying, we just need to go fishing. We just need to go fishing. Just give us a week. Give us 3 days. Give us anything. And the reality is that if we would have went fishing, even for 3 days, okay, we would have been overfished. And a lot of you don't know what that means. I encourage you to participate in the council process this year and learn what that means, because the people that told you that we shouldn't go fishing this year, there was only about 5 of us that we didn't. We saved it, because if we went fishing, we would have been overfished. We barely missed overfishing by a few thousand fish on a 3-year geometric mean. And what that means is that 122,000 that has to come back every year, and we didn't even get that with no fishing, even though they said there was double that out there, right? We missed it. And if you don't get on a 3-year geometric mean, you don't make 75%. That's called the MSST, the minimum sustainable threshold. And you don't make that 75%, 91,500 on a 3-year geometric mean. Then you go into rebuilding plans, overfish status, curtailments, fisheries closures, and even more. So it's even worse. So I just want that to be said, because there was a lot of hate that was thrown and a lot of mud that was thrown at certain individuals last year. And I just wanted to let you know, those individuals just saved you from possibly going fishing this year and possibly going fishing for the next few years. So maybe tell them thank you instead of throwing the mud. Let's get to the Klamath, and then we're straight into water. Oh, jacks. Jacks. How many jacks came back? That's the good news. The good news of today is that a lot of jacks came back compared to last year. Last year was like 11,000 jacks. The estimate is that we got about double of that, upwards. We're thinking around 20,000 plus fish right in that area on the jacks is the guess. 20 to 22,000 is my estimate. I guessed originally, before any of these numbers were even confirmed to me, I guessed 105,000 were going to come back out of the 213. Last March, I said the 213 isn't accurate. It's really about 130, 140. That's where we're at because of all the modeling errors. It was worse. The model was off 55% this year, you guys. 55%. I mean, that's terrible. That's terrible. But when we put garbage numbers in, garbage numbers come out. I don't blame the guy that runs the model. That guy's working as hard as he can. But if you put garbage numbers in a model, garbage numbers are going to come out. It doesn't matter what you put in. What comes out is not going to work. So the jack number this year is higher. So I am predicting a higher preseason abundance. I'm getting a lot of text right now and things saying, Steve just said, you told me last year 22,000 jacks would come back. That's funny you said that. Yeah, that's be a good guess if I said that last year. But that's about right, because we had about 11,000 last year come back in 23, and that produced that jack number that they said, okay, we're going to take this 11,000 jacks, and that number will then equal 213,000. Well, now the truth is because of poor water conditions, because all the babies died in the river in 2021, brood year 21, and spring of 22, that was right in the heart of the drought, remember? There was no good water coming down the Sacramento River, Feather River, American River. No good water, Klamath too. So we didn't have a good recruit. And so if 21 and 22 were bad right in there, that means that the returns in 24 are not going to be what the model says it's going to be. You have to take environmental factors and build that into the model. It's got to be in there. If you don't do that, we're going to screw ourselves. And here's how we screw ourselves. If we would have went fishing last year, they said, oh yeah, there's 213,000. And a few individuals that, in my opinion, don't even know what they're doing, said we could go kill 33,000 fish and still get 180 back. If we would have killed 33,000 fish, I don't even know if they would have ever let us fish again, because one, they would have blamed us, the fishermen and women and the industry. And then two, we would have been way, way, way below 100,000 fish, which would collapse the stock. And then you can't rebuild off of that. So we got to be smarter. We got to use our brains on that. But we do not have an estimate yet. On February 26th, we will hear from the state of California. CDFW will be holding the salmon information meeting remotely online from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. This is the same meeting that used to always take place at the Pinniped Water District. For those of you that remember going in person pre-COVID, now everything is remote. So we're going to see a remote meeting on February 26th, and that's when the state of California will give you the exact numbers that I'm telling you all right now, and give you the exacts instead of I'm giving you a rough estimate that's very close. Very close. But you'll get those numbers, and then you'll get the preseason abundance number, the SI, right? The SI, the Sacramento Index. How many fish are out there for 2025? And that will come on the 26th. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, we know you know what that number is. Give it to us. I honestly don't. I do not know what that number is. Nobody has told me what that number is. However, I've had multiple conversations with my scientists and my science advisors through the organization. I've got my own personal belief, and I'm waiting to see where the state and the federal government say we should be in order to give you that number. Where do I think that number could end up? I'll give you a guess, okay? I'm gonna guess and say that number is going to be somewhere between 260 and 360,000 SI. That's my guess. And it is a guess. However, probably is a good guess. And the only reason I know it's a good guess is I minored in mathematics, so I'm able to look at the linear line on the Jack chart for the SI abundance, and you're able to look over, if any of you were at the meeting last year, just go to the SI forecast from last year and look at the Jacks over about 22,000, and then go up to the line, and that will show you that it shows about a forecast of 400,000. However, the autocorrelation that was built into the model, the ocean harvest model, would then deduct from that line down because of the modeling errors from last year. So that 213,000 that really is way under 100,000, that will have to be adjusted. So they will take that adjustment and move it down. And great comment, Cameron. That's without fishing. There was no fishing, and we couldn't even make the 122,000 minimum according to law. So it was a great thing that we didn't go fishing last year and really hurt ourselves. That estimate is just a guess. I'm just going to guess and tell you where that's at. I could do a live Zoom here next week and kind of do a Zoom. And for those of you that want to participate, and I could share my screen and kind of show you where I'm coming up with my estimates and how I'm doing my math. It's going to be close. It's going to be somewhere around in those estimates. So what will happen now? Let's talk 25, and then we're going to go right into water and how water affects salmon, how water affects your water diversions, your farms, how it affects your municipalities. I'll talk briefly on Palisades fire, and then I'll talk also about water going to the ocean and why that's important, because there's a lot of misinformation about that. But with that estimates for this 2025 season and what we could see out there, if we do see those abundances over 300,000, I think you're going to see the federal government putting in another minimum curtailment request of 180,000 need to come home per the model. We also know the model's off a lot, right? It's off 30 to 50%. It seems like almost every single year. So I don't know if they're going to build in buffers or what they're going to do. I'm not on the Salmon Advisory sub-panel anymore. I don't sit on that committee. I'm just a member of the public. So I will be sitting in the back of the room just waiting for the one moment that they allow the members of the public to talk. And I will say what I'm telling you all right now, and mention certain facts and certain scientific documents and points, and show them their data in a different light, and see what they come up with. With that being said, do I think that we're going to be fishing in 2025? That's what most people want to know. Somebody, my first guy, let's go back to the first, there's like 100 much comments here. Didn't somebody say they didn't want to listen to me anymore? They just want the number. Are we going fishing, right? Yeah. Anthony Byram, there you are. Are we going fishing or what? That's all I want to know. Just tell me yes or no. I need to know. So I don't know yet. There is no guarantee. But I will tell you that if the season opens in the ocean, we will have a season inland. If the season opens in the ocean, there will be a season in the inland. We have made that crystal clear to the state of California for equity, as well as making sure that everyone has an opportunity at the resource. Will we be going fishing? I think there's a chance. I do. I really do. Will it be a wide open season? No. Is there going to be opportunity? I think so. I really do. I think everything that I'm looking at modeling wise, everything that I'm looking at abundance, I think that there will be some things. The only reason that I think that there will be opportunity, even though the abundance forecast is really low out there, is because of 3 years ago, we had extremely good water pushing our fish out.